Hello, and welcome back to part two of the Rejects of Capitalism podcast with me, James Rooney.
And I'm Shane Turner, and you said that, James. It's part two of episode two.
Yes, part two of episode two of the Rejects of Capitalism podcast. So we decided to split episode two into two parts because we had some drastically different ideas for topics. Like they do not relate to each other at all. So we're going to be splitting it up into two. So today we are going to be talking about voting rights in the United States. And Shane, can you kick us off with one of the biggest thing that stands in the way of voting rights in this country, and that is the filibuster?
Yes, well, today is Tuesday, January 18th. They're going to be voting on it tomorrow. But basically, the filibuster is a Senate rule. Now, most people, when they think of the filibuster, they think of Mr. Smith goes to Washington, one senator standing up and talking his ass off to kill a bill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not how it works anymore. I mean, it used to. But like now, literally, the Senate ruled that like you can't bring a bill to debate unless you have 60 votes. Why? Because 60 votes is what's required to end a senator's filibuster, which is technically a debate on a bill. So basically, to end debate on a bill, you need a 60 vote threshold to simply have a vote. So it doesn't matter if you have a majority to pass a bill, you need 60 votes just to end debate and bring the bill to a vote.
Yeah, so that's the ridiculous Senate rule that is we're going to be getting into it later. That is what's standing in the way of the John Lewis voting rights bill in Congress right now
And the Freedom to Vote Act.
and
There
the
are two
Freedom to
bills.
Vote Act. Thank you for reminding me. So I would argue that the filibuster in general is one of, if not this is debatable, if not the biggest thing that just stands in the way of democracy, period, in this
Yeah,
country.
and a lot of people who like defend the filibuster, they'll say like, oh, but like they'll give arguments for it. Like they'll say, oh, if we get rid of the filibuster, the Republicans will be able to pass anything they want. Well, for one thing, that's how majorities work. And for another thing, it's not like the Republicans would let the filibuster stand in their way if they wanted to get anything done either. I mean, McConnell got rid of the filibuster when it came to Supreme Court nominations. I
Yeah.
mean, like the Republicans will get rid of the filibuster if it doesn't suit them once they have the chance, and they've done it before. So no, like getting rid of the filibuster is just it's not going to prevent anything that's already going to happen.
Yeah.
Like keeping the filibuster is not going to prevent in the long run, because the Republicans will nix it if it's to their benefit. If let's say Joe Manchin decides to quit the Democratic Party and join up as a Republican today,
Which
giving
is
Mitch
likely at this
McConnell
point.
what?
Which would be likely if he said he's not rerunning for office. This will be his last term, thankfully.
Hopefully, but if Manchin were to register as a Republican today and giving Mitch McConnell the Republicans of the majority in the Senate, McConnell would get rid of the filibuster today if it meant passing legislation to his benefit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I actually remember that we actually talked about what kind of draconian practice more stands in the way of democracy in this country, and we sort of debated on both gerrymandering and voter ID laws. So
Gerrymandering is kind of like a thing of the past at this point, because uh, We already like know, like that's like the most easy thing that Republicans can do to win elections.
And hey, they're still doing it. I believe two governors just released uh what do you call it? Not senatorial maps, voting redistricting maps, because it's after the census and they're going to use that population to redraw the districts. Ron DeSantis's proposal included two more Republican-leaning districts, while the governor of Pennsylvania took away a Republican-leaning district. So yeah, gerrymandering is still happening.
But it's not as big of a threat as voter ID because, you know, it's one thing to gerrymander so like all the Democrats are in like a losing district or whatever, but voter ID would prevent there being Democratic districts in the first place.
Yeah, and
by preventing people to vote.
Exactly, because I learned, like, in the days of like 2015, 2016, I didn't get what was so wrong about voter ID laws, whether it was positive or negative. And then I remembered something. Poll taxes used to exist and are now illegal due to the Voting Rights Acts. I actually don't remember which one. It was either the 64 Civil Rights Act or the
It was one of them that banned. I think it was either 64 or 65.
Right. It was one of them that
taxes.
banned poll taxes. And the poll taxes in question were like, what, 50 cents to a dollar?
Well, you have to
So
understand that back then, 50 cents to a dollar had a lot more value than it
oh,
does today.
absolutely. Absolutely. But fast forward to today, what would be considered a voter ID, most people would say driver's license. Like, that's the first thing that pops into your head. Then I remember that to get to the fees associated with getting a driver's license in some states goes up to like $60. We campaigned against poll taxes that were 50 cents. Now people are okay with an indirect poll tax of $60.
You have to understand the reason that they're putting all this idea about voter ID is because, like, a lot of them have this, like, they use a defense of voter fraud. They think, oh, like, if you're voting and your vote's not verified, like, that means that, like, it's a bad election. But this has been going, like Republicans have been using this logic for 100 years. There was a movie that everyone knows is like the most consequential movie of the turn of the century called Birth of a Nation, and it was an incredibly racist movie that was responsible for the reemergence of the fucking Klan.
Mm-hmm.
And in that movie, like it was filled with racial stereotypes, like horrible racial stereotypes. It was a horrible movie, like when it comes to like content wise.
Yeah.
But in that movie, there is a scene where a freed black man is putting a ballot in the ballot box. But then when the ballot worker is not looking, he puts in another one, basically stuffing the ballot. Like that, the idea of stuffing the ballot is a racist scare tactic from 100 years ago. So they're concerned about like voter ID fraud. And even voter ID comes only to like 1,000 cases per election.
And that estimate, about 1,000 cases in a voting population of over 180 million, and I'm talking about the voting population of this country, that comes from the Heritage Foundation, one of the most conservative organizations to ever exist, and they're saying 1,000. So why are Republicans framing this as a widespread problem when even their own guys are telling on them and saying it's just around 1,000, maybe a few hundred more?
Well, I mean, it's clear at this point that Republicans don't actually care about the truth. They don't care about like accountability or anything. They just care about power. I
which
mean,
which does get into the most recent elections of 2016 and 2020.
but before we do that, we should like say that like the whole thing with voter ID laws, like I've heard some arguments from them like over the years. Like I've heard one like, oh, if you think someone can't get a driver's license, you must be elitist. It's actually racist for you to think that someone can't get a voter ID just because they're black.
I
And it's
actually
like,
I watched, oh my God, I watched the video. I think it was Steven Crowder of just him going around to random people on the street, mostly black people. I wonder why. And saying, "Oh, do you have a driver's license? What do you say to
I
people?"
don't think it was Steven Crowder. I remember it being
It,
someone else. I think it was someone named Klein. I don't know, but like
I remember Steven Crowder.
it was we both were heavily into Steven Crowder when we were young, stupid Republicans. But
I actually never
it wasn't
identified as a
Crowder.
Republican. I
I
identified as
did at the beginning,
I def,
to my
here's the
great
thing.
shame.
I never voted red until, oh my God, I think it was the New York gubernatorial race just to get Cuomo out of power.
Mm.
That
My
is the
first
only
presidential
reason I voted
election,
red.
look, my first presidential election was 2016, and I voted for fucking Gary Johnson.
Oh God,
Yeah.
Greens. Moving on to actually the elections. You made a point before that Republicans don't care about the truth; they only care about power, and that really goes into the most recent presidential elections.
Well, let's start from the beginning on this. Like if you thought that the GOP cared about voter security, then why in 2016 didn't they care about Russia hacking the election? Why did they claim that that was a lie?
Because
Why? Because
it
it
was their
helped them.
guy. It was their
It was
guy.
their guy. Yeah. Trump was put into office by Russia, basically.
Mm-hmm.
When the Democrats started saying, "Hey, like this was like there was." By the way, this was a serious problem. Like like the FBI, like was like fucking shocked that like Russia was doing this, and there were like multiple like levels of like corruption in that year, like with Clinton and with Trump.
With
You
Clinton,
know,
Trump, um, Russian intelligence flooding sites like Facebook with conservative propaganda. This was coordinated.
yeah.
And
Not to mention, I remember when the DNC when they had the Democratic convention, it had been so many months of Bernie Sanders not dropping out, and we were all wondering why is he doing that? Oh, because he wants to influence the platform. Then, right as the convention is starting, I saw news articles. Like I used to read the newspaper in those days, and I saw
read the
articles, and then
newspaper.
yeah, in 2015, 2016, when like I would go to like Beach 25th Street station, get like a daily news or a New York Post. And as the DNC was starting in 26 in the summer 2016, I remember like seeing the huge front page stories of how there was like this huge DNC leak that leaked that there was like that Hillary Clinton had colluded, for lack of a better word, with the DNC to blackball Bernie out of the nomination.
Because she was the establishment. Like that.
Yeah, but
Here's
here,
the thing that
but it's not just that. It's not just that. It wasn't just them like colluding. It was that like they actually funded, like they funded like primary defense against, like at one point, one of the allegations was that in South Carolina, the DNC funded anti-Semitic political ads against Bernie.
they what?
That was one of the things they did.
I
Like in South
followed, hold
Carolina.
on. I followed the 2016 race very closely I didn't hear they went after him because he was a Jew.
Yeah, this was in South Carolina of all places.
Hmm. You know what? South Carolina makes a lot of fucking sense because they were the first
But you
ones
know
to
what
secede
doesn't?
from the Union.
But you know what doesn't make sense that
What's
they
that?
attacked Bernie because he was Jewish? The head of the DNC at the time was Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who herself is Jewish.
Oh my god. Sometimes it really be your own people. It
Pretty
sometimes
much, yeah.
sometimes it's your own people.
And
Um
I'm Jewish, so I should know.
yeah. My god.
But like, here's the thing though, it became very clear that this was a WikiLeaks like leak on the DNC emails. But then
Yeah.
it like the question turned to like where did the WikiLeaks get the emails? They got it from Russia.
Yep. Cuz this was an entire campaign to get Trump into office.
Yeah.
Um circling back to current events, we mentioned earlier that there are Shane, you remember the names of two bills that are being not really debated on. They're in the Senate right now, specifically when it
Well,
comes to voting rights.
well, we're jumping the gun here because we're still talking about the elections. We
Okay.
haven't spoken about the end of 2020 we haven't spoken about 2020. So 2016 ended with
A Trump
basically
victory.
a Trump victory, which was powered by Russia hacking the election, basically,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that was like the biggest election security breach in American history.
Yeah.
And at the time, like the Republicans, like Trump said, like, "Oh, we got a lot of killers. You think we're the ones innocent?" Like that makes sense historically. We meddled in everybody else's election, and it's only a matter. It was only a matter of time before somebody like tampered with ours.
But two
But
wrongs don't make a right. You
not
know?
only that, but just like when you've spent like the past like 10 years talking about voter fraud and voter security and election security, and then you
You're
say
gonna turn a
nothing.
blind eye when Russia, arguably our biggest adversary geopolitically, does it to us, our election, you're gonna turn a blind eye.
Yeah,
Because it's your guy.
yeah. And then in 2020, like 2020 happened, and the election was not going to be the same. They knew that like, with COVID and everything, they were going to have to do it differently. So what
Yep.
they did is that they expanded absentee ballots and they instituted early voting. They had like drive-through voting, and they basically made it easier to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Even like it was even in like Republican states, like Texas did the drive-through voting. But the Republicans quickly learned that if you make voting easier,
More
then
Democrats
that
are
means
gonna
more
vote.
people. If you make voting easier, they found that like more people will vote, and on average, more people vote for Democrats.
Because their platform, to most people, is more popular.
Yeah.
There
Now
are
I've heard
literally
like
more Democrats than Republicans.
yeah. Now I've heard like different Republicans, like I've argued for universal suffrage, and I've argued for like free, easy, fair elections, basically. And I've had like Republicans come up and say but what if you get universal suffrage? And what if you get that and people and a Republican wins a majority? And I said, well, then that's the people's will. That's a democratically elected Republican.
And that's the thing. Like, they assume we're arguing for universal suffrage because that'll guarantee Democratic victory. There's two rebels to that. Number one, yeah, that's going to happen naturally. However, we are arguing for the people's vote to matter. If they vote
Yeah,
for Republicans, we're going to criticize the person that gets into office, but we're not going to say, "Oh, that's Republican tampering with the election. We should overturn it." No.
because here's the thing: Republicans don't like democracy.
Yeah.
Like they never did. And this is like going to be a shock to a lot of people
And
because like if they think it's a
when we
new,
say Republicans, I want to clarify that we're talking about Republican officials.
I'm not even talking about just Republican officials. I
Well,
know many
I'll talk
people.
about
No,
officials.
but let me say this though. Let me say this. Like many people think that this is a new thing that the GOP is now like anti-democracy. But there was a time when I was like libertarian leaning, conservative leaning when in my younger stupid years,
Mm-hmm.
I had conversations with other Republicans who said that they were afraid of the tyranny of mob rule. That they were
That's
afraid that like,
democracy.
oh, yeah, they said like, oh, we're afraid that if we have like true democracy, then the individual will get tyrannized by the majority.
But
But
that
it
the thing
took
they don't realize is that
is that the opposite of that is minority rule.
yeah, which is
Like
not democracy. It's
so
not
basically
democracy.
the Republicans don't like democracy because they have this like this victim complex about being the individual as the smallest minority. And they think that like, oh, if we had full democracy, then the majority would be able to legislate human rights away from us.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
think that if every person had the right to vote, that we would easily vote away the First Amendment or vote away a person's right to a fair life.
No. We really like the First Amendment. Democrats especially. And
Yeah, and
the
but here's the thing: the
violations of the First
Republicans.
Amendment has most of the time historically been used against the left wing. What about the espionage acts, the
Yeah,
McCarthy era stuff?
now a
So
lot of people like a lot of the times the Republicans and like conservatives and religious figures they have this idea of them being the victims when they've been the oppressors. Like, what is it about oppressors who say like I am the victim here as they're like beating someone else down?
honestly, that could be an episode in and of itself. But we do have to
Like
circle
I
back.
don't get it. Like a Christian says to like they're like if a Christian says to me as an atheist, like, oh, if you don't believe in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, then you are going to burn in hell for all eternity. Well, I will bask in the wonderfulness of Jesus's heaven. And if I even say that's fucking ridiculous, they're going, oh my God, that's hate speech. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus said we were going to be prosecuted,
Like I
persecuted. Oh my God.
like I
That was
said
literally
before.
a video from Dark Matter 2525. I love that guy.
So Shane's shout out to him. Like I said, this can be an episode in and of itself, but we do have to circle back to our focal point of this episode in particular,
Yeah.
which is the two voting rights bills that are now sitting in the Senate.
Well, the reason
One of which is
sorry.
going to get a oh god, I'm having a brain fart. The, one of the bills is getting a vote
I
tomorrow.
think both of them are.
Oh,
But here's
both
the
of them
thing
are.
though.
Okay.
I believe so, but here's the thing about why we needed those bills. Because it is a response for 2020 of the 2020 elections. All the Republicans started claiming that the election was fraudulent because
Mhm.
of absentee ballots, even though fucking Trump voted with an absentee ballot. And
Yeah.
like basically like they started claiming it was a false election. Just saying, like they just claimed it. Basically, that was like Trump's thing in 2016, and that we knew it was going to be that his plan in 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the Republican legislature started making laws restricting
I think it
the
was I think it was 34 states that had laws in their legislature that restrict voting in some way. I
yeah,
think that's the figure
like
I
even
heard.
New York has it. I don't know what the law they passed was because like a lot of the votes that they passed were actually made voting easier, you know?
Yeah, because it's a blue state. Seriously, it's more because it's a blue state because the these votes are quote unquote safe. like New York's a Democratic stronghold. So getting back to the bills in question, um, they uh Congress congressional Democrats have come up with this ingenious method to get these bills to the floor. And I want to use our remaining time to talk about that.
Well,
They
you're talking about something called messages between the houses, and you say it's an
Yes,
ingenious thing.
it is. It's
But
very
here's the
clever.
problem with that. But here's the problem with that. We initially thought that messages between the house was going to prevent a filibuster. It's not going to prevent a filibuster. The only thing it'll prevent is a filibuster blocking it from getting debated on the House floor.
Yeah. I am aware of the fact, like, this is just to get it on the floor,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
has
when the filibuster prevents legislation from getting on the floor, that's the problem. Like not a lot of people realize, the filibuster, it encourages bipartisanship. It
bullshit.
encourages us to reach across the aisles. No, it
Bullshit.
prevents any law from getting on the bill unless it has 60 votes, 60 vote approval. Like
To
basically you
ex-
have to hold a vote on the bill before you even bring it to a fucking vote. It's fucking ridiculous.
to explain what the process actually is, it is a congressional procedural rule, kind of like what the filibuster is. So what happens is it all has to do with wording. So what the House Democrats, the Democrats in the House of Representatives, does is that they send an identical version of the bill, but with very minute wording changes. So that gets sent to the Senate Democrats. They send another version of the bill, which is worded slightly differently, send it back to the House. The House does the same thing again. And after that third send off, it's locked in. You can't change it anymore outside of proposing amendments. So that gets past a filibuster rule that would prevent it getting on the floor. So this arcane little rule just got the voting rights bill on the floor. And this was orchestrated by President Biden, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, and Senator Bernie Sanders. It's basically to say to uh, the renegade senators Manchin and Sinema, okay, if you want to oppose these voting rights bills, how about you do it on record?
Yeah,
And you
because
get to
that's the
go
thing.
back
Like,
home to West Virginia and Arizona and explain to your constituents why you oppose voting rights. Go
but
ahead.
here's the thing. But here's the thing, though. Like, the whole reason we're in this mess is because like we have like all these senators like obfuscating on whether they support a law or not,
Yeah.
because they know that it's like if with the filibuster, it's never going to get on the floor. Chuck Schumer is like forcing the matter, and I think that this has been like a ever since like Joe Manchin like tanked the Build Back Better social spending in last month. It pissed off Joe Biden.
Oh yeah.
So
He's angry.
yeah,
And I like
so
that he's angry.
yeah, we both do. But here's the thing. At this point, the Democratic establishment realizes that they have to get this done, or at least put their money where their mouth is. And
Yep.
they've been so upset and pissed with Joe Manchin and Cinema at this point that they're basically saying, yeah, you know what, fuck it. You know, you're not going to bullshit your way out of this one. Vote on the fucking bill.
Vote on the
But
bill and put it on record. So yeah,
here's the
that's
thing. I'm not sure at this point if like they'll be able to vote on the bill if they reject the filibuster takedown, because like Manchin and Cinema are saying like, oh, we're not gonna take down the filibuster. But
well with
I don't
these.
know if
Go ahead.
I don't know if they're going to be able to vote on the voting rights legislation after this. I'm like, if they can't get rid of the filibuster.
Well, the I would say the bill is coming to the floor because of messages between the houses. I'm very happy about it. And until tomorrow, that's all that's going to be said about this story. Like, there's really nothing else we can add except like a few hours worth of what we think is going to happen based on our non-professional opinion. So I think this is a good point to wrap up Mansion in Cinema. I hope you're ready for this. This has been this has been the Rejects of Capitalism podcast, episode 2, part 2. I am James Rooney,
And I am Shane Turner.
and we wish you all a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.